At the company party, the boss humiliated the new employee for his gift. Everyone was astonished when they saw what was hidden inside the offering. Jorge, as he had many times in his relatively short professional career, stayed at work overtime again. Unlike his other colleagues, he loved his job and was ready not only to complete the tasks assigned to him, but also to stay late in the office. His love for his work, admiration for the results achieved, and the sense of satisfaction from completed projects made him an extraordinary employee, highly valued by management. He was hardworking and responsible, always prioritizing his career above all else. Jorge honored the labor code as highly as others valued their right to rest outside of work. Jorge might have been considered a young employee, but his skills and diligence earned him a reputation as a good and hard worker who could always be relied upon. His colleagues often tried to escape as soon as their workday ended, reluctantly staying late, rushing to be at home, in a bar, in a club, anywhere but in the office. They also took frequent breaks at work and found numerous reasons not to do their jobs. But Jorge always felt in his element when completing his tasks. Even though his work might have seemed boring and routine to an outsider, he loved the neat columns and rows of numbers, numerous charts, and calculations. This kept him focused and immersed, allowing him to spend his days in peace and quiet. That's exactly what he liked, when no one disturbed him and his world revolved around reports and charts, shrinking to the size of his workspace. Look at him, someone passed by his desk, and Jorge heard the muffled laughter of two of the office's most notorious gossips. A real nerd. I had one like that in school, giggled the second young woman, whose name Jorge never remembered. They often made fun of him, but he never got the jokes. All those brainiacs are like that, the first woman snorted, and Jorge involuntarily recognized her voice, realizing it belonged to the secretary of one of the departments. Lucia never liked him. She was envious, often gossiped, and spent most of her workday either chatting with colleagues or on her phone. She reluctantly did her immediate duties, and the results were as sloppy as her remarks about him. Jorge had heard somewhere that she spent a lot of time on social media, often posting things to appear successful and talented. Their mutual dislike was evident. The woman didn't like him because he wasn't one of those handsome airheads she found attractive. Jorge wasn't called an antisocial nerd for nothing. He rarely attended corporate parties. But on the rare occasions when he did, he silently observed his colleagues' behavior. Lucia constantly tried to attract the attention of men from other departments, those considered good-looking and more successful in their careers. Several times Jorge saw Lucia manage to leave the parties with different men, even married ones, and he despised her for these questionable escapades. Jorge never considered himself handsome, nor could he be deemed successful. He was often invisible to women, which didn't bother him at all. He valued professional relationships above all, and all this familiarity in workplace communication was excessive to him. Even outside corporate parties, he remained cold and detached, not flirting with colleagues, preferring not to gossip and not to waste time on idle talk. When he visited the kitchen for a cup of coffee, he never shared it if he was lucky enough to pour the last of it into his mug. In front of his superiors, Jorge remained confident and proud, never allowing himself to be hypocritical or to appear better than he was. He was always ready to admit his mistakes and take responsibility for his actions. For him, it was an experience he valued highly. When Jorge first joined the company, colleagues initially tried to befriend him, but his manner of prioritizing work over personal connections gradually led to their initial detachment, which then turned into resentment. For the first few months, they tolerated him, noting that he worked hard. The women in the office who found him attractive, Jorge was tall, slim, with handsome features, sky blue eyes, and a charming smile, initially flirted with him, trying to get his attention. However, the young man behaved as if they didn't interest him at all. This, combined with the fact that he didn't fawn over his superiors and didn't allow colleagues to offload extra work on him, slowly but surely led to their indignation and frustration. "I hate asking him for anything," whispered Jesus to his colleague, having once again been refused help by Jorge on a project. "Why do you even bother asking him? It's clear he won't help," Manuel snorted dismissively. "No matter how many times I tried, it never worked." Even our girls don't like approaching him. Exactly. Not sociable at all. Jorge perfectly understood that his colleagues openly hated him. Every day he heard words directed at him, gossip and complaints accumulated with each passing day. The young man couldn't understand this approach. At work, one should work, fulfill their duties, and maintain a professional demeanor, not gossip, look for ways to shirk work, and rush out of the office. He couldn't stand the repugnant attempts of women to flirt with him to get their way. Colleagues shouldn't behave like that. It would have been fine if not for the fact that the management, who initially valued such a diligent worker, gradually started listening to the colleagues' complaints about Jorge. This day was just like hundreds of others. The office was immersed in the usual sounds, the clacking of keyboards, employees' discussions, calls, and meetings. 3 colleagues, notorious gossips, gathered in the kitchen for a cup of coffee, as always, discussing news and their office peers. "Hey, do you think Jorge is normal?" Martin, who never understood the long-standing employee who didn't participate in typical colleague conversations, asked very quietly. "Do you think such nerds can be normal?" responded Camilla, one of the accountants. At 35, she loved gossip and often chatted with her colleagues in the kitchen corner while enjoying a cup of coffee or tea and fresh pastries. "Listen, he doesn't even have a girlfriend." "Of course, he's not normal," snorted another employee named Mercedes. "I don't understand why he's even working here." Why, Martin shook his head. "Because he delivers good results." "Results aren't everything." Camille grimaced. "Workplace relationships should be good too. And he doesn't want to connect with anyone, which is really annoying. You can't even count on his help when you need something. Maybe we should force him to quit?" Mercedes thoughtfully twisted a lock of hair around her finger. "He won't leave. He's clearly satisfied with what he's doing. Haven't you noticed? He's often the first in the office and frequently the last to leave. He has no life, so he hangs around here all day." "Wait," Martin scratched his chin thoughtfully. "What if we do it differently?" "What do you mean?" "What are you thinking, Martin?" Mercedes squinted, realizing the man had something in mind. He peeked out from the kitchen corner to ensure no one else was around, then stepped closer to the women and spoke very quietly. "We can get rid of him. A bit of specific gossip, a few well-placed comments near the right people." Martin smiled. "And he won't be able to explain himself to the bosses." "I like this idea." Camille sipped coffee from her cup. "But what kind of gossip should we spread to get him fired?" Martin's smile widened. "Cecilia, the boss's secretary." "Oh, you've heard that Mr. Torres often locks himself in with her?" Mercedes giggled. "The old man has excellent taste," Martin nodded. "Gray hair and a young mistress, as my grandmother used to say," Camille shrugged. "Exactly. Everyone's heard that the boss is sleeping with his secretary. And how he hates it when other men approach her." Camille gasped. "And if Mr. Torres hears that Jorge flirted with Cecilia, he'll definitely want to fire the insolent guy." "Oh, you're a villain, Martin." "I love it." Mercedes playfully slapped the man on the shoulder. "Let's get to work, girls," Martin nodded to them. "You love to gossip with everyone, so go ahead. And make sure the rumors are juicy." The women exchanged smiles. That day, they gradually approached almost all their colleagues, whispering new, carefully crafted, though false, rumors about how Jorge flirted with Cecilia right under the boss's nose. "Daniela, darling, did you hear?" Mercedes relished spreading the rumors. "About what?" "About whom?" "Did something happen?" The girl widened her eyes, ready to hear new gossip about colleagues. "Jorge. Oh, I know him. Such a bore. It's impossible to even talk to him. He's always buried in his charts and reports. Or whatever he does. Can you imagine, he hit on Cecilia? No way? But she. Yes. Imagine what will happen if Mr. Torres hears about it. And you know, last weekend the boss and Cecilia were together in Madrid? They say she craved some local delicacy, and Mr. Torres couldn't refuse her. Oh, I envy her. He takes her somewhere every month, Mercedes sighed, playing along with her colleague. Don't worry, our time will come. Oh, my boyfriend would never take me anywhere. Maybe just to visit relatives in the village. You can't imagine how boring it is there. Just farms and farmers, not a single club to dance in. Don't be discouraged, Mercedes. Everything will be fine, I'm sure of it. Well, at least Cecilia will have plenty of memories of beautiful places. She'll be able to tell her children about them. The women chatted about various topics for a while, and when Mercedes returned to her desk, she saw Martin giving her a promising look. At the same time, Camille was whispering with her colleagues, a few women who shared a large room and worked together every day, discussing the rumors Camille had dropped about Jorge. No way? Dolores, distracted from her report, stared at Camille. Jorge? But he's not a looker. Exactly. I've seen him walk Cecilia home several times after work. You know, girls, men don't do that just because. No doubt, they've been sleeping together for a while, Erin scoffed, continuing to input something on her computer. Cecilia understands that Mr. Torres's attention won't last forever, and he could find a younger girl at any moment. And Jorge is a smart, hard-working guy who will make a lot of money. This young woman was a master of talking and working simultaneously, which always impressed her office neighbors. I've heard that men who aren't handsome compensate with their skills in bed, giggled a middle-aged woman who loved participating in such discussions. Florence, are you speaking from personal experience, or what? Camille smirked. The woman didn't answer, playfully smiling. Oh, you naughty girl. Dolores laughed. Camille was pleased. The gossip was spreading through the office like wildfire, gaining new details and speculations. That's exactly what they needed. It seemed their plan was working just as Martin, Mercedes, and she had hoped. It didn't take long for Mr. Torres to hear his employees whispering about the scoundrel who was hitting on Cecilia and even had the nerve to walk her home. The jealous man immediately summoned Jorge to his office, not wanting to investigate whether it was true or not. He firmly decided to fire the guy to show everyone once and for all that he would not tolerate such disrespect in their company. Finding himself in Mr. Torres's office, Jorge was confused. He didn't understand what could have been the reason for being called in. Sit down. Mr. Torres barked. Jorge obediently took a seat opposite the boss, silently looking at the stout man who, though trying to appear well-groomed, now looked more like an enraged boar. Tell me the truth, Mr. Torres hissed, wiping his sweaty forehead with a handkerchief. Jorge frowned slightly. If you're talking about the development of the new growth concept, it's not ready yet, but I'll finish it by evening. To hell with the concept. Torres barked, slamming his fist on the table. Tell the truth. Did you sleep with her? I'm not sleeping with anyone, Jorge blinked in surprise. I live alone, I don't even have a girlfriend. And I think that's none of your business. Mr. Torres scrutinized the young man and realized his face expressed genuine bewilderment. Coughing, Torres adjusted his tie and smoothed his gray hair, trying to calm down. I'm talking about Cecilia. Did you sleep with her? Cecilia? I see her only a couple of times a month when I come to your office, that's all. I don't. Mr. Torres raised his hand, cutting off the young man, and exhaled tensely. Maybe so, the man said. But you're fired. Pack your things and get out. Jorge was stunned. Fired? After several years of loyal service to Mr. Torres's company, long hours in the office, and numerous successful projects, they decided to fire him? But why? Mr. Torres, the young man tried to speak. Silence. I won't tolerate someone who disregards corporate ethics in my company. You're fired. Jorge realized that the boss would not listen to him, and what could he even say? He wasn't going to make excuses. His pride didn't allow him to prove his innocence. Senor Torres gritted his teeth. I could fire you for cause. But I won't do that. However, I will not tolerate any more gossip in my firm. You worked well, and I won't ruin your life by firing you for cause. Write a resignation letter, and I don't want to see you here anymore. Jorge silently left and headed to his workplace to gather his few belongings and write the letter, as well as send his work to colleagues who could take over the projects, even though they had previously tried to dump all the work on him. His colleagues watched as he silently packed and left, but as soon as he stepped out the door, muffled whispers began. He was fired for harassing Cecilia. Camilla and Mercedes smiled triumphantly. Their rumors were even more successful than they had thought, as it took less than a week for them to get rid of that annoying bore. Jorge, however, left calmly. At first, he felt shocked and empty, unable to believe he was fired over such an incredible lie. But then he realized he wouldn't let this incident affect his self-confidence. Nothing. They lost an excellent employee, and I will survive, he told himself. He was a true professional in his field. He didn't care about gossip or non-work-related conversations. Undoubtedly, he would find a job quickly. After all, even while working for Senor Torres, he periodically received interview invitations from other companies and was often offered a much higher salary. Jorge didn't accept these offers because he was a loyal employee, but now nothing was stopping him. If he didn't want to change anything before, now life itself had pushed him towards transformation. Walking home along the road he had long been accustomed to, he thought he would miss it. I've stayed here too long. It's time to change something, but I'm ready for new achievements, whatever life brings me, he convinced himself, smiling. After several years of hard work, he had saved a decent amount. He spent little and earned quite well. An unexpected thought even made him stop, thoughtfully looking at an advertisement poster showing a sunlit beach with a can of some drink beautifully arranged in the sand under the shade of a palm tree, covered in droplets of moisture. Why not take advantage of this sudden opportunity, he mumbled to himself. I haven't been on vacation for so long. Maybe go to the sea? Or to the islands? It would be great to relax and recharge. Upon reaching home, Jorge immediately sat down at his computer and began looking for a suitable vacation spot. After sifting through many different paradisiacal places where he could rest before looking for a new job, he settled on the incredibly beautiful and exotic Bali. Choosing a hotel, booking a flight, and paying for everything online, Jorge began packing his suitcase, looking forward to the trip and new experiences. The flight went smoothly, and once in Bali, Jorge felt excellent. Checking into the hotel, he immediately changed into his swim trunks, grabbed a beach towel, and headed to the ocean. The beach was just as Jorge had imagined: volcanic sand, coconut palms, and the boundless azure ocean water gently lapping onto the sand with small waves. The air, smelling of salt, was thick and hot, the sun was beating down, and a light breeze barely provided relief from the heat. Jorge happily headed into the water, enjoying the coolness and the waves. He was delighted to be in this place, peaceful and serene. After swimming, the young man thought about what he could do on the island. He didn't feel like sunbathing in such heat, and for a while, he sat watching the tourists splashing in the water and the novice surfers enjoying the low waves. Jorge realized he wanted to do something interesting and educational, not just lazily lying in the shade or swimming in the ocean. His eyes fell on a poster announcing a tour to the island of Sumbawa. Long ago, he had dreamed of visiting there, surfing, and scuba diving. Sumbawa wasn't particularly popular among tourists, but Jorge knew he could see unique natural landscapes there and dive in the ocean among whale sharks. Now he could fulfill his long-held dream. And escaping the heat of Bali would be a good idea. Calling the number on the poster, the young man signed up for a 3-day tour, luckily securing the last spot on the plane that would take the group to Sumbawa that same day. Jorge managed to dash to his room, change, quickly pack a small backpack for 3 days, and hurried to the small plane already waiting for the last passengers. The young man looked at the people anticipating 3 days of adventure and couldn't help but be happy to be among them. The packed tour schedule included not only diving with whale sharks to observe these magnificent giant creatures feeding on plankton, small fish, and crustaceans. The tour also offered exploring the underwater world around the islands of Moyo and Satanda, descending into the crater of an actual volcano, visiting untouched beaches and tiny islands in the ocean, and seeing a unique waterfall in the depths of Moyo Island. All this, and much more, seemed like a fantastic way to spend time, and Jorge completely understood the excitement of his tour companions. Most of all, people liked the opportunity to leave Bali, where incredibly humid and hot weather had persisted for several weeks. Therefore, tourists eagerly took the chance to change their surroundings and at least temporarily forget about the difficulties caused by the weather during their vacation. As soon as the plane landed and the tour passengers disembarked, Jorge noted the stunning landscapes surrounding Sumbawa Besar. The tour operator seated the group in a vehicle, and while they drove, the young man admired the nature outside the window. They were taken to a port where they boarded a speedboat to Moyo Island, and Jorge enjoyed every minute of the journey. Despite the early evening, the journey filled with impressions exhausted the young man, and when they checked into the hotel, he felt tired and incredibly hungry. He had enough energy only to grab a bite in a local restaurant and return to the hotel, where he collapsed on the bed and immediately fell asleep, not forgetting to set the alarm for 3 a.m, as his first adventure was to start at the crack of dawn. Waking up to the chirping alarm, the rested and refreshed young man quickly got ready and headed for the long-awaited excursion, where they would swim with whale sharks. Jorge had no idea how incredible these creatures would be up close. Their enormous bodies were intimidating, but these giants were not dangerous at all. On the contrary, they were quite harmless and friendly. The young man had admired them from afar for many years, and now he could see them up close, realizing that this adventure would be etched in his memory for the rest of his life. After swimming with the fish, Jorge climbed back into the boat. While the other tourists continued to enjoy the ocean's beauty, he began to observe those around him. Among the group, he noticed an elderly couple. They seemed incredibly in love, joyful, and attentive to each other. "This is what true love should look like," Jorge muttered to himself, watching as the man smiled at his wife, brushing a lock of gray hair from her eyes. The woman laughed like a teenager, loudly, openly, and her eyes sparkled with happiness. Despite their age, the couple seemed like peers, unlike many others in the group who had age differences. Jorge glanced at another couple, a long-legged beauty in her 20s who was hanging around an elderly man. It was clear that the older man was happy to be with a beautiful young girl, while she had found herself a source of money and experiences. Jorge looked back at the elderly couple and noted the stark difference. The couple, though not young, were well-groomed and clearly took care of themselves. Both the man and his wife were fit and tanned. Their beauty was enhanced by the love and tenderness with which they interacted. "Luis, we came to relax and enjoy the world's beauty, and you," the woman laughed, playfully slapping her husband on the shoulder. "I don't need the world's beauty when I have the most beautiful one right here," the man responded, stroking his wife's shoulder and pulling her close. "Oh, you rascal, just look," the woman gestured toward the endless expanse of the ocean. Jorge saw a ring slip off the woman's thin finger and disappear into the water. The couple stepped to the edge and looked down. The woman sighed in disappointment. "Oh, God," she said. Her husband sympathetically patted her shoulder, looking sadly at the water, understanding that the ring was gone forever. Jorge thought that the ring must have been very important to them. But he didn't have much time to dwell on it. The guide gathered everyone onto the boat, and they headed back to the hotel to rest after a busy day. That evening, Jorge saw the elderly couple again in the restaurant. They were sitting at a nearby table, allowing Jorge to hear their conversation. To his surprise, the woman was still very upset about losing the ring. "But how, Luis, it was your gift. How can I forget it?" the woman lamented. "You gave it to me over 40 years ago when we were poor students. I remember how hard you worked, even at night, to buy it and propose to me." "Don't worry, my love," the man replied with a smile. "I can buy you any diamond, as many rings as you want to replace the lost one. Just don't be upset." "How can you not understand, Luis? I don't need other rings. I need that one because it symbolizes the love you brought into my life. I wanted to pass it on to our granddaughter when she grows up. I hoped it would protect her so she could grow up and find a love as strong and immense as ours. Jorge listened thoughtfully, eating his dinner. His mind was filled with melancholy. It was hard for him to hear these words, and he fervently hoped that the couple would remain together for many more years, as loving and tender as they were now. But the young man felt their loss almost as keenly as the woman did. The next day, Jorge went scuba diving while the other island guests explored different attractions. He loved swimming with whale sharks so much that he wanted to spend another day in the ocean, this time exploring the rich reefs and the fish living among them. Diving with a group of fellow adventurers, he enjoyed the slow swim among the coral reefs, attracting the attention of numerous marine creatures. He had never seen such a rich underwater world, and he felt like a child when a colorful fish, daringly, swam close to him, allowing him to admire its bright colors and shiny bead-like eyes. Jorge was swimming, enjoying this pastime, when he suddenly noticed a glint on the seabed. Intrigued, he dived deeper and discovered a small, beautiful shell with a ring caught on its edge. Immediately, he remembered the elderly couple from the day before who had lost a wedding ring in these waters. But how could it be? Looking at the simple ring with a small diamond, he knew he had to find the couple and return it. They would surely be thrilled to get the ring back. However, when he returned to the hotel, he realized finding the couple would be impossible. They had already checked out and left no contact information. They had paid in cash and likely flew off to other places or returned home. Jorge was saddened but didn't dwell on it too much, keeping the ring as a reminder that there were still people capable of genuine love. Jorge wasn't in a hurry to go home. His finances allowed him to enjoy exotic places for a long time. So, he decided to stay in Bali for several months. Every day he swam in the ocean, dived in search of new, unseen fish, got into surfing, and even started learning to play a musical instrument. The local guys, whom he befriended on one of his evening walks, were happy to help him with this, and he often spent his evenings surrounded by new friends, playing tunes on the angklung. This musical instrument, though initially seeming simple, turned out to be much more complex. Jorge was embarrassed by the laughter of his new friends, but gradually, as they taught him to play more confidently, he began to feel free and unafraid of challenges. There was something renewing about this extended trip. Jorge understood that when he returned home, he would never be the same. He became more friendly, open to communication, and more at ease interacting with both familiar and unfamiliar people. While staying in Bali, he often struck up conversations with fishermen, listening with admiration to all sorts of stories, from local legends to incredible events that these people had witnessed. The evenings spent with the locals left a lasting impression on him, and he knew he would miss these heartfelt conversations, jokes, laughter, and the musical performances that had become dear to him. But nothing lasts forever, and Jorge decided it was time to return home. As soon as the tanned, now athletic young man arrived back in his homeland, he noticed an increased attention from women. Girls who had once passed by him indifferently now couldn't take their eyes off him. Smiling back at the flirts, Jorge promised himself to start his life anew and live as he had learned to live in Bali. Despite a long break after his resignation, he easily found a new job. For a professional of his caliber, with his experience and knowledge, he was quickly and effortlessly hired by a large company with a decent salary. Changed both externally and internally, Jorge quickly integrated into his new team, showing himself as a friendly, confident, and cheerful colleague. He no longer hid at his workplace as he once did and could cheerfully chat with colleagues when they found themselves in the kitchen for a cup of coffee or tea. "Oh, you're just the person I wanted to see." This time, a colleague from the neighboring department caught him in the kitchen. "We need your help. If you want to give me more work." No. Marcus, with whom Jorge had become friends from the very first day, hurriedly interrupted him. "This isn't about work. Our boss has finally returned from his long vacation. He has a big anniversary coming up, and we're all chipping in for a gift." "Shoo! He's coming," hissed Aaliyah, who was lurking by the door with her nose buried in a cup of aromatic tea. Jorge glanced toward the door and saw an older man smiling, whose face seemed very familiar. He suddenly remembered the elderly couple who had lost a ring while vacationing on the islands and almost gasped. The man was his boss. Marcus made sure that Senor Bonaventura had passed by and could no longer hear their conversation. "So, amigo, we're all chipping in for a gift for him. I understand that you're new here, but even you must agree that a 60th anniversary is a big deal." Jorge asked Marcus about their boss with interest and found out that the man had been running the company for the past 20 years and was highly respected by everyone working under him. He was married, moreover, his marriage had lasted 42 years, and as everyone in the company knew, he adored his wife, sparing no expense on gifts and always finding time for her. Later, Jorge was able to confirm that his new boss was indeed the same man he had seen on the distant islands during his vacation. Senor Bonaventura's wife showed up at the office, and the couple, smiling and flirting, headed off to dine at a nearby restaurant. "Listen, so what? Are you going to chip in for the boss's gift?" Marcus sat down next to Jorge. "If you don't have the money, just say so, I can cover for you, and you can pay me back from your salary later." Jorge laughed. "No, it's not about the money, Marcus. I have money. I just know I can give Senor Bonaventura a gift that he will love." His friend raised an eyebrow skeptically. "How can you know what he likes? You don't even know him." "I'll give him something of mine," Jorge said cunningly. "Don't worry, it'll be perfect." "Oh." Marcus dragged out disapprovingly. "Won't you regret it later?" "Don't worry, I have an excellent gift," Jorge winked. "You haven't been working here for long. How can you know what the boss likes?" Marcus persisted. But the young man just laughed at these words, confident in what he knew. He never admitted to Marcus that he had once met their boss before. Preparations for the corporate party dedicated to Senor Bonaventura's anniversary were in full swing. Jorge's colleagues whispered among themselves, puzzled that the young man, being a new employee, was confident he could give the boss something he would like. All the employees loved and respected Senor Bonaventura. He was strict but fair, always approached matters with understanding, and could listen to the opinion of any of his subordinates, regardless of whether they were experienced employees or newcomers. He respected when people around him could not only express their opinion but also, if necessary, admit their mistakes. The better Jorge got to know his new boss, the more he liked working for him. Finally, the long-awaited day arrived, which everyone in the company had been looking forward to. The rented restaurant hall sparkled with beauty, and all of Jorge's colleagues had dressed up in beautiful suits and dresses worthy of such an event, and Jorge himself didn't hold back. When the celebration began, and people started presenting gifts to Senor Bonaventura, who stood next to his beaming wife, Jorge watched intently as his colleagues tried to impress the boss. And although some gifts were clearly more expensive than others, no one was envious, marveling at the taste of the giver. Some colleagues had chipped in for an expensive watch engraved with "Best Boss in the World" and a bottle of fine tequila. Jorge smiled as he watched Marcus and others hand over this gift to Senor Bonaventura. Looking at the modest, small box in his hands, the young man couldn't help but smile wider. Finally, it was his turn. He decided to give his gift last. Jorge approached the elderly couple and noticed how everyone around fell silent. The silence was so overwhelming that the young man could hear his own heartbeat. "Senor Bonaventura." Jorge began with a smile. "I've been working for you for a short time, but I'd like to express my respect with this small token." The young man handed the boss a small box tied with a simple ribbon. The intrigued boss took it, intrigued by Jorge's confident words, and opened it. The man's eyes widened, and he burst out laughing in surprise. "You decided to give me a seashell," he said through laughter and the tears that came with it. "The last time I received something like this was from my son when he was very little." The colleagues around burst into laughter. "You found it in the sea and didn't even bother to go to a store," laughed Eva, a beauty who had tried several times to convince Jorge to chip in with them for the collective gift. "Senor Bonaventura, please look inside the shell," Jorge requested with a smile. The man took the shell out of the box and shook it. Something fell to the floor, glinting in the light, and Senor Bonaventura froze, shocked by the sight of the wedding ring he had given to his beloved many years ago. He knelt to pick up the piece of jewelry, wondering how it could have ended up here if his wife had lost it during their trip to the islands. Without a doubt, the ring was the very one they both cherished so much. The man, with trembling fingers, turned the ring and read the engraving inside, "Together forever." Oh. Senor Bonaventura couldn't even utter a word. The surprised and confused faces of his colleagues, his wife, and Jorge stared at them, not understanding what was happening. "Senor Bonaventura," Jorge began, smiling. "You probably don't remember me, but we've met before. Before I started working at your company, I saw you and your wife when I was on vacation in Bali. We were on the same tour, swimming with tiger sharks. I saw your wife lose the ring in the sea, and I was lucky enough to find it the next day while scuba diving. I tried to find you that day to return the ring, but you had already left without leaving your name or phone number. The shell in which the ring lay is from the same reef. When I recognized you, I wanted to return the ring, but then I was told you had an anniversary coming up. I couldn't help but think it would be the perfect gift. I really wanted to return the ring on this significant day to thank you for the lesson you taught me. You helped me believe that true love can still be found in our time, a love that will last for many years. Thank you for showing me this, even though you didn't know it." Senor Bonaventura turned to his wife, who stood next to him with tears of joy in her eyes. "My dear." The man smiled. "You so wanted to find this ring, although I offered to buy you a more expensive one, and here, the universe itself decided to give us this gift through this young man. He didn't have to keep it, hoping to find us and return it. I couldn't not keep the ring." Jorge shook his head. "I saw how much it meant to you and hoped that someday I could give it back." The young man watched as Senor Bonaventura placed the ring on his wife's finger, as if reaffirming the vows they had once made on their wedding day. The couple thanked him for a long time for returning this sentimental item that was priceless to them. And the story of how the ring was returned to its owner filled the elderly couple with admiration. The ring was even more special now, as even the ocean couldn't take it away. 6 months had passed since that anniversary. Jorge arrived at the office half an hour earlier than usual to calmly drink his coffee and finish a report. He went to the kitchen corner, turned on the coffee machine, and turned to the window. He was reflecting on his life and how everything had worked out perfectly. He had been unjustly fired from a company where employees treated him disrespectfully, piling on more work. How would he be living now if that hadn't happened? Would he have gone to Bali? Would he have found a more interesting and prestigious job? Would he have met new friends? His thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. "Excuse me, could you step aside a bit, please? I need to wipe the windowsill." Jorge turned and saw a cleaning lady. "Are you new here?" But the cleaning lady couldn't find the words to respond. She looked at him with stunned eyes. And then Jorge remembered where he knew that voice from. "Camilla, is that you?" the man said in surprise. "Why are you? Did you leave that job? You had a good position. After you were fired, the company slowly but surely went downhill. And I was fired for poor performance," Camilla said with resentment. "Really?" Jorge said sarcastically. "But why a cleaning lady? That jerk, Senor Torres, wrote such a reference that I can't get a job anywhere now. And you, I see, have changed. You've matured, become more talkative. People change. I hope, Camilla, you change for the better too." They exchanged smiles, and Jorge, with his aromatic drink, headed to his workplace. After his last words, something clicked inside Camilla. Her former colleague, whom she had spread rumors about to get him fired, turned out to be a rather pleasant young man. Maybe they had treated him wrongly? At that moment, Camilla decided to ask Jorge for forgiveness. She felt guilty for the first time. The next day, Camilla met Jorge again in the kitchen corner. He was, as usual, drinking his morning coffee. Camilla gathered the courage to speak first. "Jorge, can I talk to you?" He looked up and nodded. "I want to apologize for everything that happened. I was wrong and acted meanly. I'm very sorry." Jorge looked at her, pondering her words. Then he slowly nodded. "Thank you for the apology, Camilla. I appreciate it. But, sometimes life gives us these lessons so that we can become better. I was never angry with you. Your rumors and my firing led me here, to this company. And I also got to go to Bali and live there for several months." "Really?" Camilla's eyes showed genuine interest. She felt a weight lift off her shoulders. "Really? Tell me about your trip. I would also like to change my life and become better." Jorge smiled. "How about I tell you after work?" "Deal." The girl extended her hand. Since then, their relationship began to improve. Camilla found a friend and mentor in Jorge, who helped her find a new direction in life. She was no longer the envious colleague, but a confident woman ready to help others. Several more months passed. Camilla got a job in the HR department at the same company where Jorge worked. They often had lunch together and shared their thoughts and plans for the future. Jorge was happy to help Camilla change her life and enjoyed his own new successes at work. Sometimes life really gives us a second chance, and it's important not to miss it. Camilla understood this, and Jorge was glad to be part of this